There's another Gillian Keegan interview on the crumbling school scandal that we should talk about. The Education Secretary also spoke to ITV, where she tried to pass the buck.
It is not the job of the Department for Education, but we chose to do that because we wanted to make sure that we had that information centrally. On top of that, we wanted
to... on that, sorry. Yeah. A school collapsed.
Yes.
And it took you 4 years to send out questionnaires to find out how many schools had RAC.
No, we sent a warning out to the people responsible.
But you're saying that the government is not responsible, ultimately, for the safety of children in schools?
The school building's responsibility is with local authorities and multi-academy trusts.
Do you believe the government did everything in its power?
But we've taken further now.
Do you believe the government did everything in its power, has done everything in its power, to make sure that children aren't being taught in schools that could collapse without warning?
Absolutely, because the responsible bodies have that duty. What we have done since is we have basically said we want to have more information centrally.
Well, I mean, I don't think you should be congratulated on that. I mean, there are literally children.
I'm not looking to be congratulated. I'm just saying what we have done.
There are literally children who've been going to school in buildings that could have collapsed. Children could have been seriously injured. Children could have died. And only now are you assigning caseworkers and money to sort this out?
No, the responsible bodies have always been responsible for making sure they have surveyors, making sure they look at things like asbestos, have an asbestos plan, RAC, etc. They have a responsibility for the maintenance of their buildings.
It's true that local authorities are responsible for school maintenance, but they can only do as much as their budget will allow. And their budgets have been repeatedly cut. Despite knowing about the risks to schools since 2018, the Tories kept shrinking schools' cash. Maybe because it's not their kids waiting like sitting ducks in dangerous classrooms. No, their kids are safe and sound in Winchester College, in Eton College. Still, it seems Keegan would, after all, like that pat on the back for all her hard work. After that interview with ITV finished, Keegan was caught saying this.
We will get a plan, and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Gillian Keegan, you've done a fantastic job. Gillian Keegan, literally, who even are you? The thing you're best known for is the person that the British government sent as a delegate to Pope Benedict XVI's funeral. Like, literally, that's all you've achieved as Education Secretary. Maybe pissing off a bunch of teachers for wearing a 10K Rolex watch in a negotiation settlement. Like, that is what you are known for, the Pope and your Rolex. The Tories want a gilded lettuce for destroying this country. It's absolutely maddening. Like, they think that they should get a gold medal for falling out of bed in the morning, which by the way is quite similar to how Keir Starmer thinks of himself right now. Like, these people need to do their jobs and then they can get a medal. But as it stands, these people think they should be congratulated for putting children at risk and because they've starved schools of funding. Like, give me a break. We should add that Keegan has since apologised for that hot mic moment. But one question that still hasn't been cleared up is who's going to cover the cost of temporary classrooms and rebuilding whilst the RAC issue is resolved? On Sunday, with Laura Kunsberg, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said this.
What I want to say also as Chancellor to parents is that we will spend what it takes to sort out this problem as quickly as possible.
So do you commit to covering whatever costs are required to remove all of this dangerous concrete from schools around the country?
We will spend what it takes to make sure that children can go to school safely, yes.
Apparently the Treasury didn't get that memo. Just hours after that interview with Hunt's own department began briefing against his pledge. The Guardian reports this. Treasury sources briefed that any such funding will come from the Department of Education's existing budget for buildings and not from additional funds. Whitehall sources said schools, academies and local authorities forced to bus their pupils to alternative sites will not be given extra cash either. Ash, why are the Tories being so stingy when millions of children are at risk?
I mean, the question of why they're being so stingy is that it reflects their general contempt for public services. And I think that you've seen it with those, car crash Gillian Keegan interviews. where she talks about what the Tories did to the education sector. She goes, well, you get much better value for money these days. That's simply not true. That is simply not true one bit. You've got schools being turned into providers of last resort because you've got so much of the social safety net being hacked to bits that children are coming in hungry, with unwashed clothes, with unwashed hair, dealing with much higher rates of, children who are reported to the local authorities because of issues of abuse and neglect, which are also things that are really associated with increased rates of child poverty. Nobody looks at that context, what schools have had to deal with because of the assault on the public sector, and goes, oh yeah, we're getting really great value for money, particularly when you look at the ways in which schools' budgets and local authority budgets have been cut in tandem. Instead of looking, I think, seriously at the cause of the problem, which is that you've had structural and institutional buck passing. So you've got central government funding being cut to councils. You've got central government funding being cut to the Department of Education, but then you've also got the government turning around and saying, no, it's the responsibility of the local education authority to sort this out. What you do is you create an impossible context for schools and for local education authorities. Also, by the way, when it comes to academies, their funding isn't from the LEA. Their funding is directly from the Department for Education. So in terms of the attempted wiggling out of accountability by Gillian Keegan there, she's not even gotten her facts straight. I think in terms of the attitude to spending during the austerity years is that you had this myth which was being propagated by the Tories, their think tank allies like the Institute for Economic Affairs and the Taxpayer Alliance, and also huge swathes of the mainstream media as well. This myth was that, well, the reason why the economy is in trouble, the reason why we've got this big deficit is because there was too much waste in the public sector. Look at their budgets. We'll pick on these individualized cases of mismanagement or waste or bad decision making. We'll say, well, this is rife through the public sector. Now, this was and is a misleading image of public sector finances. What you had that was being done a lot better was contingency planning, contingency saving. This was something which you saw in the NHS, where you had money being allocated for forms of emergency capacity. The likes of Andrew Lansley and Jeremy Hunt, when he was health minister, looked at that and went, well, that's wasteful. Why are you saving your money for an emergency? I know what we'll do. We're just going to run this service at emergency capacity all the time, and we'll cut any money, we'll cut any saving, we'll cut any forward planning for if there is something out of the ordinary that happens and we've got to dip into our pockets and spend something. We're going to cut all that emergency capacity because it's wasteful. You've seen a similar picture here with schools' capital spending. So there are much more long-standing problems, I think, with the way in which the schools estate has been managed. Outsourcing giants like Carillion being prime amongst them. But leaving that aside for a second and just sticking with austerity, you imposed a funding regime on schools, which meant that they had to make choices very, very frequently with each budget, with each tax year, between immediate delivery of services and spending on longer term projects. And that's a no-brainer if you're a head teacher or you're managing a school and you've got so much money and you've got so many kids and you've got kids being presented to you with greater need than they had before, and you've got less money than you did. What are you going to do? Are you going to fix this roof, which may or may not fall down, or take the time to inspect it? Or are you going to be like, okay, no, we need exercise books, we need teaching assistants, we need classroom space, we need materials? Well, you're probably going to go for those really immediate day-to-day problems. And this is something which has been going on for a really long time. I mean, just last October, you had a survey of over 600 head teachers carried out, 2/3 of them said that they were considering cutting spending on classroom assistants, delaying capital spending, or scrapping capital spending altogether. What that means is that things like very crucial repairs and refurbishments were being put off or abandoned altogether because head teachers were looking at budgets and going, well, it's that or not being able to function as a school at all. So this is a Conservative created problem. It is a reflection of the utter contempt that they've held the public sector in for well over a decade. And what Gillian Keegan wants is a fucking pat on the head, because technically the people who are having to implement the government's, atrophied budgets had the statutory responsibility for this particular aspect of schools maintenance. It's insulting, it's pathetic, and it's also, in essence, a lie. It is fundamentally misleading.